The pressure mounts on Pakistan's Prime Minister.
Imran Khan! Zindabad! Pakistan! Zindabad!
As a vote of no confidence nears, hundreds of thousands rally behind their leader. But with defections from his own party, can he survive the opposition push to oust him? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Imran Khan. Well, he came to power promising to end corruption and revive a struggling economy. But for some, Imran Khan has failed to deliver. Now the former cricket star turned politician is facing a fierce fight for his political survival. Calls to oust him are getting louder. But if the streets of Islamabad are anything to go by, he still enjoys significant support. On Sunday, hundreds of thousands gathered in the capital to back their prime minister. Khan delivered a marathon speech telling the cheering crowd that foreign forces were behind plans to topple his government.
Attempts are being made to change the government through foreign funding. The money is from abroad, and the people that are being used are ours. Some of them unknowingly, and some knowingly are using this money against us. The Pakistani nation needs to decide if they will let the conspiring slaves who have taken billions of rupees from abroad be successful.
Now, when Imran Khan came to power in 2018, he promised reform and an end to corruption. But in the last 3.5 years, inflation has risen dramatically, and some argue corruption has actually gotten worse. The opposition says Khan is guilty of misgovernance and is piling on the pressure to oust him. But it's not just political rivals who are unhappy with his performance. Many within his own party are also frustrated. Raja Riaz and several other members of Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party have questioned the prime minister's leadership. Riaz refuses to support Imran Khan, even publicly stating his differences with him. Still, it is the opposition leading the campaign to oust the PM. Earlier this month, Bilawal Zardari, who heads the opposition Pakistan's People's Party, called the prime minister a puppet and said the PPP would use democratic means to get him out.
The no-confidence motion against the prime minister is the democratic weapon of this crowd. We always understand that democracy is the best revenge. So what better revenge could there be? The puppet was imposed on us, imposed on this nation, imposed on Pakistan. So we're using our democratic right to send back this prime minister.
So let's get further perspective from the opposition now. And joining me from Islamabad is the parliamentary leader of the Pakistan People's Party in the Senate, Sherry Rehman. Thank you so much for being with us. We know you feel that there is reason to oust the prime minister, but given the fragility of the economy right now and this constant cycle of never seeing a PM finish a term, it doesn't necessarily bode well for the image of Pakistan as a stable country. So is this really worth the effort, or could it take Pakistan from something bad to something even worse?
Thank you. I think very clearly there's a sense in the public, general public, and the opposition as well, that the longer Khan stays in power, the more difficult it gets for Pakistan to be taken out of the current economic, and if there's even an energy crisis right now. So each day the clock ticks towards further instability, further evolving crisis, and the sooner we do this, the better it is. Let me also be very clear that the creation of the crisis is not of the opposition's making. Why do I say this? Because Khan has lost political capital very fast. He has been unable to use the most effective tool a prime minister can use in a parliamentary system, and that is convening power to sit down during a crisis or even otherwise and evolve a stakeholder input on policy. This is how
Okay.
all governments run in the past, and he has been unable to do that or
Hmm.
unwilling, extremely divisive and polarizing to the point where we are literally in a perilous economic situation.
Right. Let me make the point though that the energy crisis is a global issue. Global inflation is a problem. Two of his 3.5 years in office were over the course of the pandemic. Is it fair to blame the leadership at such I'll say, a unique time in global history for what's happening now?
Very good point. The issue here is that it is an even more unique, or shall we say, challenging time for Pakistan because while there's been a pandemic, while there's been an oil shortage and an energy crisis globally, Pakistan has seen much worse energy and oil, for instance, prices. We're a big importer of oil, and we have seen much higher prices, say, in 2012 and 2010, when the price domestically of petrol, of utilities, of gas, of essential commodities was
Okay.
astonishingly, yeah.
Let me ask
So
you though. I
it's
mean, our time is limited, so I wanted to get a lot in with you. I mean, when we look though, if we look yesterday at the sheer size of Imran Khan's support rally in Islamabad, some even described it as gargantuan. If he's forced out, and his supporters in those numbers see that as a purely opposition effort for political gain, as you know they might, as well as his accusations of this is a foreign power-backed effort, do you fear what could ensue?
So the foreign power-backed effort is that accusation is laughable because really, who would be doing this and why would they be doing it? Secondly, and it's almost the delusional rantings of a very desperate person who does not want to give up office even when the votes have run out. Now, rallies outside Parliament, really every political party is having the same size of rally. People's Party has not done one today or yesterday or will not do one day after because we don't want to add to further destabilization. But you've seen our long march. You've seen the size of our rallies. Other political parties are also congregating and mobilizing very large numbers. That is not a problem at this point. It is not. This is a battle in Parliament. That is a constitutional system. This cannot be settled. This fight cannot be settled in the street. This is a fight in Parliament. A vote of no confidence is the only constitutional way of removing a prime minister who has lost the confidence of the people and that house. And that has clearly
Okay.
happened.
But while you say that, you know that so many Pakistanis argue that their politicians, only do what they do for personal gain, not for the good of the nation. And you're saying this is not
So
about what's happening on the street, this is about what's happening inside Parliament. But how do you convince them that what they say is not the case?
we can't go out. I can't go to a general store or a petrol pump or any public place without being harassed about what we have done to rid Pakistan of this terrible example of disastrous governance. So you can do a vox box on the street and you get the pulse. A rally by a political party does not tell you which way the country is going. This is a parliamentary system, and the People's Party is not looking to install its own prime minister in any case. So the fight is not about ourselves or power. In fact, it's a very poisoned chalice he's leaving behind, in the sense that it's such a huge mess that it'll take years to even bring Pakistan back to the place it was when he left it. So it's not a happy place for anyone to be in. And it would have, yes, we would have preferred a system where he finished his full term and let the people vote him out. We will also be going and pushing for electoral reform because he has uh, brought in a lot of reforms, electoral reforms that rig the election in his favor. So
Okay.
we would not see a free and fair election at all.
Let,
Yeah, these contests need to be constitutional. They need to not be fought on the street. He has every right to mobilize people on the street
okay.
just as we do. But right now, this is not an election campaign. If there is one, we will go in without the toxic reforms he's
Understood.
brought in. Yes,
Let me ask you
yes.
quickly, though, going forward, should your should your push to oust the prime minister be successful, what about foreign policy? Would the opposition pursue a different strategy, or, is it right to keep the country on this path of independence, as he's called it? Basically saying, we don't have to take sides, we will befriend whom we want to, be it Russia, be it China, even the Taliban. Is that the path you think the opposition would be on as well?
See, the opposition will go the path of what Parliament says. Here, there is no pulse. There is no degree of convenership. He has not been, whether it's the Kashmir crisis or the COVID, he has never been able to or wanting to get the
Okay.
consensus of the Parliament. Whereas we feel that we will all sit together, and when the Parliament says, like the Turkish Parliament once said, this is what we want, we will not send our forces XYZ place. When Parliament says shut down Shamsi Bay Air Base, which was the United States, that happened in our government. We did it, but we engaged constructively with all international players, and that is a decision for new governments to take, who are able to and willing to convene Parliament and its very critical standing committees that create core policy. Policy
Okay.
cannot be created by one and his mental ramblings.
Sherry
It is
Rehman.
not a function.
Okay.
We are
Thank
not going
you.
to rigid which he's doing.
Understood. I'm going to have to thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, the clock is against us. I'd like to thank you for being with us on the Newsmakers. Well, let's broaden out the discussion now and bring in three new guests. Huma Baqai is a political analyst and associate professor of social sciences at the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi. Mosharraf Zaidi is in Islamabad. He's the CEO of Tabadlab think tank and a former senior advisor to the Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And also in Islamabad is Sardar Ramesh Singh Arora, a member of the Provincial Assembly in Punjab and the PML-N's Minority Wing Central General Secretary. Thanks all so much for being with us. We also reached out to several members of the ruling PTI party, but none, unfortunately, were available to appear. So let me start with Mosharraf Zaidi. First of all, if we look at Sunday's pro-Khan rally, we saw the Prime Minister got a pretty tremendous response, actually, when telling the crowd that it is foreign powers manipulating Pakistan's politics and bribing officials to work against him. Tell me first if you think people believe that in Pakistan.
Well, Pakistan's a big country. We are at 220 million people, and it's a very young country. The median age in Pakistan is 23. Young people will believe anything that credible, good-looking, authoritative old men will tell them. And so, especially men that know how to use Twitter and Facebook. So I think, the question of how many Pakistanis believe Prime Minister Khan is a good question. And I think certainly those that are already partial to Prime Minister Khan will certainly believe him. I think that yesterday's rally in Islamabad was really the beginning of the election campaign that the PTI and Prime Minister Khan intend on running so that they are back in power sometime between now and a year and a half from now.
Okay. Just to say, in defense of the youth, I've seen older people believe the same. So, yeah, there's always that tendency to think that conspiracy theories, there is at least a grain of truth there, and that foreign powers are often at work, particularly in the region. But if they do believe that in some sense, or other issues, and he is removed from power, let me turn to Huma Baqai. What's next for Pakistan if he does not survive this vote of no confidence with the kind of street support we saw for him? Do you fear what Pakistan could potentially descend into?
Well, Pakistan is already in a state of chaos. The chaos can become much more worse. Our biggest challenge is our shrinking sovereign economic space. We're constantly struggling with that. Imran Khan in his speeches have also pointed out towards what he has been able to achieve. What he has not been able to achieve is media support. Also, I think politically he is naive. He had an inexperienced team, and all of that contributed to the meltdown that we witness in Pakistan today. But having said this, does he have support on the street? Absolutely, yes. Largely, people, his supporters, think that the parliament is being manipulated. Yes. Do they think all three parties have come together and their sole objective is to remove him? Absolutely, yes. He brought in the construct of, or he pivoted his campaign on now foreign policy issues, where somehow he was able to remove it from how inflation, food inflation in particular, or his lack of governance or bad governance is an issue. And in all honesty, if you do a comparison, even with our next door neighbor, in terms of how COVID was handled, I think Pakistan did really well. And largely
Okay.
why Imran Khan is facing this problem is because he has not been able to handle the media. He has a very anti IK bureaucracy, and the control that particularly PML-N had on the bureaucracy contributed to the problems he's facing. And now he's giving in to issues that he had previously not given into. For example, the latest is that he's agreed to give one of his allies the chief ministership of Punjab, which many think may turn the table when eventually the vote is cast for the no confidence move. And with the way things are moving in Pakistan and how
Okay.
fluid the situation is, what I'd like to say and end with this is that it's not over till it's over. IK is
Understood.
a man who's going to play till the last ball, and he's doing just that.
Fair enough. Let me turn to Sardar Ramesh Singh Arora. Um, we just heard, a reference to how Pakistan actually did manage under the course of the very difficult pandemic, and there are some who argue that it's unfair. And I actually put this to Sherry Rehman, another opposition member, in our previous interview, that people say Imran Khan is unfairly being blamed for the economic damage that many countries around the globe are suffering as a result of the pandemic, and political instability and an energy crisis. Do you think it's fair that maybe he's taking a little too much of the blame for circumstances beyond his control?
Yeah, thank you very much. The point here it is that whatever Imran Khan is claiming today, no doubt during the pandemic, like he tried to manage the pandemic, like the other countries, Pakistan managed it very well. I appreciate that. But the other thing is because he has incompetent team, particularly if you talk about the finance team, this is his fourth or fifth finance minister, which he is changing. So it shows that there is no continuity of economic policies. And today, the people of Pakistan, because we have to go back to the people of Pakistan, we also are answerable and responsible to the people of Pakistan. And when we go back to our constituencies, we have lots of the pressure because of the price hike, inflation, poor governance, corruption, and people want, and there's a pulse from the people, and they want removal of the prime minister. They want there should be a prime minister who look after their issues, their challenges, and particularly the price hike. Because nowadays, if we talk about the price hike, and you are mentioning that price hike, so if you talk about particularly the energy and the petroleum prices, these prices were much more higher when we
Okay,
took
yeah, we
government in
actually heard that in the
2013.
previous
The
interview.
price
But,
of
but let,
per
let me ask
barrel
you
petrol.
quickly, because people are saying you are a member of the government, and people say on the opposing side of your stance that Pakistan's government really does itself a disservice by creating, at the very least, an image of political instability, and in truth, it is political instability. Do you think this is really good for Pakistan to have, for example, a prime minister that's never been able to complete a term?
This is unfortunate. We, like, if you remember, on the very first day at the time of beginning, when this new government was starting, our opposition leader Mia Shahbaz Sharif, the president of Pakistan Muslim League UN, he handshaked with the prime minister and gave his a concept that we are here to give you economic support, economic policy support. Our support would be with you all the time. The opposition supported the prime minister, but unfortunately, this prime minister was unable, and all the time he's the slogan of corruption, corruption, and the corruption is increasing. This is so unfortunate. I personally agree that the Prime Minister, whosoever is the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister must complete his term. But this is so unfortunate that there's a pressure of the people and they want change. So we have to follow the people of Pakistan.
Okay, let me ask.
And if he has support from the Parliament and if he has members in the Parliament, he can come back. But right now there's a pressure, and we have used our constitutional right in the Parliament. So let's see whatever the member of Parliament decides.
Fair enough. Mosharraf Zaidi, in your opinion, I mean, can this be fixed, or is this never-ending? Is this the never-ending story of Pakistani politics?
You know, I think the question about sort of the image of Pakistan, I think, you know, the image of Pakistan is secondary to the reality of Pakistan, and the reality is that it is an enduring and resilient democracy despite the incredible amounts of pressure and stress that the political system has to take on. And that stress principally is driven by a neighborhood that is completely dysfunctional. Pakistan is surrounded by an extremist regime in Iran, an extremist regime in Afghanistan, a non-democracy in China, and an extremist regime in India. Pakistan is a unique nation within its neighborhood and on the global stage. And so, of course, there will be foreign intrigue, there will be foreign interest in what happens in Pakistan, but the responsibility for navigating through these challenges falls on the most powerful office in the country, which is, bar none, the office of the Prime Minister of Pakistan. The question about whether Pakistan is unfortunately going to keep living through this cycle, or whether or not Pakistan can exit out of it, that question, unfortunately, is not one that only politicians can answer, because the constant interruption in Pakistani politics by the Pakistani military is what creates the dysfunction of Pakistani leaders. So, you know, when Nawaz Sharif got sacked in 2017, of course it was his fault that he didn't manage his prime ministership as well as he could have. But that sacking was not possible without intervention. Similarly today, Prime Minister Khan is the one that's responsible. Despite having managed COVID so well, it is Prime Minister Khan's responsibility to manage the national discourse and national politics in a manner that enables him to govern for the sake of the country. But the fact that this no-confidence move is taking place is because there is, let's call it, a lack of military intervention after 3.5 years of very strong support that the Prime Minister received from the military. The military is not a political body, and until the military sticks to what it does very well, which is defend the motherland against all threats, internal and external, and stops engaging in political intervention, I think the cycle is going to continue as it has.
Okay, interesting. Huma Baqai, I want to get your thoughts on that, because, yeah, we have failed to mention potentially the military's role in what is happening now. Are you on the same page as Mosharraf?
Largely, yes. It is the elephant in the room, because having a no-confidence move is nothing out of ordinary in a democratic system. India, for now, Indira Gandhi alone had 15 no-confidence moves. It's essentially if those are organic. The problem here is that because Imran Khan's government was seen something that was put together in some ways artificially, and it wasn't entirely organic. Today, he is being blackmailed by his allies, he's being blackmailed by his own people, but also the problem is just not the military, it is also how our politicians or how our politics has functioned over the years, where they don't really act as representatives of the people. The accountability in the system is poor, if I may, if non-existent. And I think this is all a part of the democratic transition that Pakistan is moving through. Like we say that to have democracy, you need more democracy. And I think that's what's happening in Pakistan. Everybody's learning their lessons. Perhaps even the establishment is now understanding that there's only this much they can do in manipulating the political matrix of Pakistan. So this is learning for all of us, and I hope that eventually Pakistan does not lose out on this, because something that the federal ministers constantly threat the opposition with is that don't do this, don't disrupt the system, don't disrupt the apple cart, because the result may be that this entire system may get wrapped up, we won't have democracy at all, and there'll be military intervention, and all of this will be gone for 10 years. I hope to God that is not true, and I hope there are constitutional restraints to this. But having said this, I largely agree with Mosharraf Zaidi that we need to let the democratic process be organic, take its own course.
Okay.
It's difficult, it's chaotic, but that's the way out.
Huma Baqai, you will have to have the final word. So unfortunately, we are out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank Mosharraf Zaidi and Sardar Ramesh Singh Arora as well for being with us, and our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey, and we'll see you next time.